Alright, guys. Yesterday I decided to pop in for a little bit of chat, which it's been quite a while. It was relatively entertaining, but almost every time I deal with theists in chat, I get some of the same old talking points that are just so easily refuted that it's laughable. But they just never seem to get it. Part of this, I believe, is willful ignorance, and it's just honestly, I believe that their identity is attached to their belief system, and when your identity is attached to any sort of belief, your mind automatically we can prove this. It's like a well understood psychological phenomenon. You will literally perform mental gymnastics in order to defend your identity. It turns out we're not wired specifically for seeking truth, at least most of us. We're wired to survive. They're very different functions. And it should be easy to understand that they will serve entirely different purposes. That's why facts matter. That's why you don't just take something that makes you feel good and go, "Oh, that's true because it makes me feel nice and shiny." Like, anyhow, I'm gonna go into a tangent. So we're gonna talk a little bit about evolution here. So first, I'm gonna do a very basic overview deal here. Yes, in the scientific community, quote, evolution is a fact, meaning that organisms have changed over time and are related through common ancestry, is a well established observation supported by substantial evidence from the fossil record, genetics, and comparative anatomy, making it a fundamental principle in biology. However, quote, evolutionary theory refers to the mechanisms and processes that explain how this change occurs, which are still being studied and refined. Key points to remember: fact versus theory. While evolution is considered a fact, the theory of evolution is the scientific explanation of how evolution happens. Evidence for evolution. This includes the fossil record, genetic similarities between species, and observable changes in populations over time. Scientific consensus. The vast majority of scientists agree that evolution is a fact. So, I don't know if this is intentional or not. Sometimes I think it is. It really depends on the person. Sometimes they're just ignorant and they're told this really dumbed down version of events, probably on purpose, so they completely misunderstand everything. So you oftentimes hear, "It's just a theory. And that means, it's not proven. It's just something somebody came up with. Doesn't mean anything. It holds just as much credence as religion." So first of all here, it's not necessarily evolution versus creation. So I've made this point before. Now, obviously, I think creation is silly, but in the context that we're talking here, theism in general, meaning the belief in a god or gods, especially one that is like a creator deity or deities, is not mutually exclusive with the idea of evolution. So stop this stupid shit where you deny facts to protect your ego. It's sad. So, okay. A quote by Richard Dawkins. Evolution is a fact as securely established as any in science, and he who denies it betrays woeful ignorance and lack of education, which likely extends to other fields as well. So we're going to do a quick read here. And the thing is, and this is why it sort of irritates me, like the sheer stupidity involved here. Most of the information that I'm discussing and that I've already went over has been around for decades. This is not new. It's like people want to be stupid. So, Misconception Monday. Let's stop monkeying about, shall we? Now, this goes back into, and I'm not reading the article now, this is my own spiel. This goes back into straw man tactics. It's very common that theists, because they can't win an intellectually honest debate, what they tend to do is they will straw man the evolution perspective, and they'll take it and make it an easily refuted, or, and in their mind it's usually emotional, but in their mind it makes it easier to defeat because they're stripping it of its actual legitimate points. They'll turn it into a really dumbed down, stupid version of what it actually is. Like, for example, or it'll be entirely emotional, like, I did not come from a monkey. Now, one, even like evolutionary biologists don't make the claim that we came from monkeys. So we share a common ancestor with chimps. This is a fact. DNA doesn't lie. If that makes you feel a certain way, this is one of the points I want to get across here. If you hear that we share a common ancestor with chimps, and it makes you feel a certain way because you, I don't know, you think that humans are like special, created in the image of God and all this crazy delusional shit. Like, because of your feelings is why you're reacting. Not due to any evidence, not due to any sort of facts or anything. It's just based on how you feel. And you should never, ever engage in any sort of fucking discussion on your feelings. Not as it relates to this sort of topic, anyhow. Because how you feel is completely fucking separate and irrelevant to what is true. What is true does not give a fuck about your feelings. What is true does not, it doesn't matter. And it shows you the way these sort of people think, how their worldview is constructed. Now, me personally, if I am given evidence that completely shatters my worldview, I will flip my fucking opinion like that, like nothing. It'll, because my worldview is not based on like emotional identity. My worldview is based on facts. That's why I believe what I believe. Anyhow, I'm going to go ahead and continue. I have a 3-year-old daughter who is obsessed with Curious George. I think I can recite every word to every one of the 102 episodes, which means that I know roughly 102 scenarios in which the man with the yellow hat tells George, be a good little monkey, which in turn means my daughter is familiar with the 102 scenes in her favorite show that make her mother yell, ape. Yes, Curious George is not a monkey. He is a chimpanzee, which makes him an ape, as the man with the yellow hat would well know, as a scientific illustrator of some kind, and with a scientist who alas wears a lab coat for a best friend. But I am digressing a little bit because ape versus monkey is not the subject of this post. The subject is misconception: humans evolved from monkeys. Correction: modern humans and modern apes share a recent common ancestor. In biology, we name organisms according to their evolutionary history. Who your most recent ancestors were determines what you are. Apes like Curious George, along with gorillas, Neanderthals, modern humans, and many other lineages, are called apes because they descended from a common ape ancestor, not a monkey ancestor. So if anything, humans most recently evolved from apes, not monkeys, but we didn't really do that either, at least not in the way most people understand it. Often when people say or hear humans evolved from apes, they picture apes as we know them, that is to say modern apes, turning into humans. People in the anti-evolution camp mistakenly try to use this as an argument against evolution. You silly scientists, they say, patting us on the head. How can we have evolved from chimpanzees if there are still chimpanzees? Monkey with a human skull. Oh, it's a emoji, and it didn't render. But anyway, continuing. Right. How indeed? The reason is, of course, that we did not evolve from modern chimpanzees. Rather, humans and chimpanzees both evolved from a common, now extinct ancestor. So, instead of humans evolved from apes, one really should say modern humans and modern apes evolved from a common ancestor. Fossil and genetic evidence suggests this ancestor, let's call it CHAP, which stands for Chimp Human Ancestral Populations, lived around 6 million years ago. As its name, if not its acronym, suggests, CHAP was not an individual but rather a group of populations. One of these populations evolved over many thousands upon thousands of generations to become modern-day chimps. Pan troglodytes, the common chimp, and Pan paniscus, the bonobo. Another one of the populations evolved, again over many thousands upon thousands of generations, to become a variety of hominins, including us, Homo sapiens. I'm painting a very simple picture here. I have so far described only the initial split. Evolution by splitting, in which A becomes B and C, is called cladogenesis, and it occurred many times along both the modern human and chimp lineages after that initial split. Linear evolution, or anagenesis, in which A becomes A, also happened along with both evolutionary paths. With anagenesis, there is observable directional change within a group. When people are confused that there are still chimps today, they are usually under the impression that all evolution happens in this linear way, but actually the consensus among evolutionary scientists is that cladogenesis has been by far the more important pattern in the history of life. So what should you say if a child, or anyone, confronts you with the idea that evolution can't be true because they saw chimps just the other day at the zoo? I suggest you explain, with as little judgment as possible, that we did not evolve from modern chimps. Rather, both modern chimps and modern humans evolved from a common ancestor. You can always bring in a very common analogy to help get this important idea across: the family tree. Siblings share a common ancestor, usually called mom and dad. This is a good time to reiterate that despite the name, common ancestor does not mean one single individual ancestor, but a group of individuals that lived at the same time and contributed genetic material to their descendants. Chimps and humans are a lot like siblings. In fact, they are so much like siblings that we call chimps our sister taxa. A 2010 paper by NCSE Alums Jenai Scott and Eric Michael for Evolution, Education, and Outreach explains this analogy thoroughly and has some nice diagrams to illustrate the parallel relationships among family members to those of modern humans and apes. Another paper, this one in the American Biology Teacher, Johnson and others, 2012, provides a few common questions and answers about human evolution. For example, they delve into exactly what fossil and genetic evidence tells us about CHAP, explaining that CHAP probably appeared to have more in common with modern chimps than modern humans, especially in terms of cranial features such as brain size, prominence of canine teeth, and a jaw that projected out from the face. This does not mean, however, that modern humans are somehow more evolved than modern chimps. Rather, data suggests that both lineages have undergone evolution at roughly equivalent amounts of evolutionary change since the time of the split, though certain types of evolutionary change have occurred more frequently in the human lineage, especially at the level of gene regulation and biological changes that involve the brain. See the linked American Biology Teacher paper above for more detail on this. I want to conclude with a plea for compassion when confronted with questions along the lines of, if we evolved from chimps, why are there still chimps? This stuff can be hard to wrap our heads around. And certainly in the case of children, the ignorance is not usually willful. I can't tell you how often I've listened to scientists bungle this topic, saying we evolved from chimps instead of the more appropriate chimp-like ancestors. And even if said correctly, it's completely understandable that chimp-like ancestor gets translated to chimps in someone's head. So have patience. Muster some good resources and lay it out with compassion and empathy. Hopefully your students will be more teachable than the man with the yellow hat is. No matter how many times I try to explain it to him, he still tells George to be a good little monkey. Alright, I will try to include the link to this if I can remember, as always. I believe, well, I'll just explain the obvious. My approach is far less compassionate than this woman. And I believe that's for many reasons. For one, I think it's naive. Well, she does go into children, which I'll agree with her on that. But adults generally hold these views because they've been indoctrinated into this crazy delusional fucking fairy tale shit as a child. Now, the problem is they have, as I mentioned before, tied their identity to this worldview. You cannot compassionately reach them. It's not possible. Most of the time, in fact, no matter what you do, even if you're a dick like I sometimes am, you're not going to reach them. Which is why I say this again and again, and I will say it repeatedly until the point is frickin' gotten across. Most of the time, when I quote debate a theist, I'm not trying to change their mind. I am, in almost every case, trying to reach third party people who aren't brainwashed. So you'll notice that, well, you wouldn't notice if I did otherwise, but with very few exceptions, like my family members in certain cases, I only engage in debate in these sort of topics in a public manner. The reason why is because the entire point is to take some of the people who haven't been indoctrinated to this point, who are just kind of questioning and wondering what's going on and like, is there a God or isn't there, etc. I'm trying to get them to think by using actual facts and logic. I am not trying to change the mind of some person that believes that like Jesus walked on water. And don't get me wrong, if that happens, absolutely great. But in my experience, it's almost never the case, and it's because of what I've already been over. So the best thing you can do is just be direct. Explain precisely why they believe what they believe. Explain why it's straw manning when they're straw manning. Go into the root cause of why they made a mistake in the first place. Then everyone else that's watching can see it for what it is. And then when they hear this sort of like fallacious reasoning in the future, they know what's going on. They know not to take it seriously. So, to reiterate really quickly, I've kind of jumped all over the place as I tend to do. Evolution is only a theory insofar as we don't yet understand every single tiny little detail on exactly how it works. That does not mean that evolution is like a random hunch. It is a fact. It's an absolute fact. You can't deny it. Like, well, you can deny it, but when you deny that evolution is a fact, you're essentially like a fucking tinfoil hat conspiracy theorist. Like, anything you say after that point is rendered obsolete and irrelevant. Like, no one can take you seriously at that point. It's if like if I were to take something that's just absolutely beyond a shadow of a doubt true and just say the opposite, you would think I'm a fucking idiot for good reason. And that's exactly the same thing here. So you can, if you believe you can reach someone and you do want to try to have an individual conversation and that's actually your goal, fine. But you need to get these, quote, low-hanging fruit out of the way first. If they claim, especially after you've clarified on this and given, like, the information, the knowledge that we know and have known for decades now, if you tell them, or if they tell you, evolution is just a theory, personally, I recommend that you just dismiss them and move on to like conversations that might actually lead somewhere. Because that person is, I'm not even going to try to be polite. They're fucking retarded. They're idiots. They're imbeciles. They're driven by emotion. They're incapable of logical thinking at all. Anyhow, thank you for your time.